What's up guys, we're coming at you with a brand new Magic the Gathering deck profile, and today we're going to actually take a look at a deck based around one of my favorite characters in all of Magic the Gathering, Chandra Planeswalkers. Now I recently managed to grab one of these epic Magic the Gathering core set 2014 banners, and definitely inspired me to rebuild this deck. Now I had this deck a while back, way before core set 2020 came out, and then of course I built this deck, a deck similar to this theme in for Standard and on Arena for core set 2020. So of course we're talking about Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh. So before we jump into it, let's take a look at our Commander's ability. She's a 3-drop 2/2 human shaman that reads whenever you cast a red spell, untap Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh. You can tap her to deal 1 damage to target player, and if she's dealt 3 or more damage this turn, you exile her and then return her to the battlefield transformed under her owner's control. She transforms into Chandra Roaring Flame, and for plus she comes in with 4 loyalty. For +1, she'll deal 2 damage to target player. For -2, she'll deal 2 damage to target creature. And for -7, she'll deal 6 damage to each opponent, and then each opponent dealt this way gets an emblem that says at the beginning of their upkeep, the emblem does 3 damage to you. Now, of course, this is going to be a mono-red commander deck, and much like my Bolas deck, is going to be themed as much around Chandra as possible. Now, obviously, we're not running every Chandra Planeswalker that's been printed in the deck because we are already running a bunch that takes up at least 1/10 of the deck, and running any more would get into a bit cloggy. So we are trying to make the deck as playable as possible as well. So keeping all that in mind, let's jump into it, and hopefully you guys do enjoy the profile. What better place to start up our Chandra deck than with our Chandra Planeswalkers themselves? The first two we're going to take a look at are Chandra Torch of Defiance and Chandra Acolyte of Flame. Acolyte of Flame is a 3-drop for 4 loyalty, and she has 3 abilities. Her first ability is for 0, you can put a loyalty counter on each red Planeswalker you control. Her second ability lets you create 2/1/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste. They'll be exiled at the beginning of the end step. And for -2, you can cast an instant sorcery card from your graveyard, but if it gets exiled at the end of the turn. Torch of Defiance is a 4-drop for 4 loyalty and has 4 abilities. Her first ability for +1 lets you exile the top card of your library, and until the end of the turn, you may cast the card. If you don't, she deals 2 damage to each opponent. For +1, she'll add 2 red to your mana pool. For -3, she'll deal 4 damage to target creature, and for -7, she'll give you an emblem that reads whenever you cast a spell, you can deal 5 damage to target creature or player. Both of these are incredibly important cards in the deck, as Acolyte is able to pump up the loyalties of all your Planeswalkers, making them easier for you to ulti. Torch of Defiance will just allow you to play the cards from the top of your deck, she'll give you mana, and she'll also give you an emblem that can deal a ton of damage. So we have Firebrand and Pyromaster. Both of these cost 4, and Pyromaster enters with 4 loyalty, and Firebrand enters with 3. Pyromaster reads for +1, you can deal 1 damage to target opponent, and 1 damage to creature that the opponent controls. That creature can't block this turn. Her Zero ability is the main reason why we use her. We can exile the top card of our library, and unlike Torch of Defiance, we may actually play the card. So if it's a land, we can play the land. For -7, she'll exile the top 10 cards of your library, and you can pick an instant or sorcery card exiled this way, and you may cast it and copy it 3 times without paying its mana cost. Firebrand has +1, she'll do 1 damage to target creature or player. Don't use it too much, only just really to pump up her loyalty. Her next 2 ability is what we really use. They allow you to copy target or instant or sorcery spell that you cast, and for -6, she'll deal 6 damage to up to 6 target creatures and or players. You don't really use her negative, you mostly just use her +1 to give her loyalty, and her -2 to allow you to copy spells. Our 2 6-drop Planeswalkers with Chandra Awakened Inferno and Chandra Flamecaller. Flamecaller is a 6-drop for 4 loyalty and will read for +1. You can put 2 3/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste onto the battlefield. You exile them at the end of the turn. For +0, she'll be able to allow you to discard your hand and draw that many cards +1. So obviously if you have 0 cards in hand, you don't have to discard anything, but you get to draw 1. For -X, she'll do X damage to target to each creature. Of course, you're going to use her 0 ability more than anything else. Awakened Inferno can't be countered, so she's pretty much guaranteed to hit the field, and for +2, she'll give each opponent an emblem that reads at the beginning of their turn. They'll take 1 damage. For -3, she'll deal 3 damage to each non-elemental creature on the battlefield, and for -X, she'll deal X damage to target creature or Planeswalker, and if that would die this turn, they get exiled instead. Last Chandra Planeswalker we run is Chandra Fire Artisan. She's a 4-drop with 4 loyalty. Her consistent ability is whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are removed from her, she deals that much damage to target player or Planeswalker. Now, she can't hit creatures, but she can hit other Planeswalkers, she can't hit players. For +1, she'll exile the top card of your library until the end of the turn, you may play it this turn, and for -7, she'll exile the top 7 cards of your library until the end of the turn, you may play them. At 2 of the most important cards in our deck, which are the Chain Veil and Chandra's Regulator. The Chain Veil is pretty much standard in all Planeswalker Super Friend decks, and it'll give us 2 damage if we don't use a Planeswalker ability this turn, but we can pay for and tap it to allow all our Planeswalkers to use an extra ability. ability. Chandra's Regulator is also a very powerful card in this deck. It's a 2-drop artifact that reads whenever we use a loyalty ability of a Chandra Planeswalker, we may pay 1, and if we do, we can copy that ability and choose new targets for that ability. And we can pay 1 and tap to discard a mountain or a red card to draw a card. We're going to be playing a lot of spells in this deck. We do want lots of ways to copy them to maximize the amount of value you have. So let's take a look at the ways we have to copy cards right now. First off, we have Double Cast and Reverberate. Both of these cost 2, and they read whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we can copy it and choose new targets for the copy. We're also running Repeated Reverberation, which is a little bit more costly at 4 mana, but it does allow us to copy Planeswalker abilities, and we get to copy those abilities twice. And of course, we can choose new targets. Running Dual Cast Mage, which we can flash in to copy a target instant sorcery and choose new targets for the copy. And finally, we're also running Reiterate, which is a 3-drop that has buyback for 3, which allows us to copy, and we can pay 3 to add back to our hand, which will allow us to go infinite red mana with Mana Gazer. Insult to Injury, we're not really running the injury part, but we are running definitely for the insult part, is a 3-drop sorcery that prevents all damage from being prevented this turn, and it doubles all damage that the source we have would deal. It can definitely help you win. We're also running Pyromancer's Goggles and Primal Amulet. Pyromancer's Goggles is a 5-drop artifact that'll tap for red, and when we use it to cast an instant or sorcery spell, we can copy it and choose new targets for the copy. Primal Amulet doesn't do that on its own immediately. It makes all our instant sorceries cost 1 less, and when we cast one, we put a charge counter on it. When we have 4 or more, we can transform it, which will tap into a land that we can tap for any mana we want, and when we use that mana cast into sorcery, we can copy it and choose new targets for the copy. More generic creatures. First off, we have the Young Pyromancer. Whenever we cast an instant sorcery, we can create a 1/1 red elemental creature token, and of course, unlike Chandra's, these won't die at the end of the turn. Chandra's most well-known creatures with Chandra Spitfire and Chandra's Phoenix. Both of these cost 3, and they both have flying. Spitfire is a 1/3. It reads whenever an opponent takes non-combat damage, it gets +3/+0 until the end of the turn. And Chandra's Phoenix has haste, and whenever an opponent is dealt damage due to a red Planeswalker spell or an instant or sorcery, we can add 8 back to our hand from our graveyard. Running Heart of Kirin and Endilion the Great Revel. The Great Revel reads whenever a player casts a spell, we convert mana cost 3 or less, that player loses 2 life. And then, of course, Heart of Kirin is a 2-drop vehicle. It is, of course, the ship of her father, and it has flying and vigilance, and for crew 3. We don't need to crew it for 3 because we can also remove a loyalty counter from a Planeswalker to crew it instead. Our ramp, we're going to start off with our ramp creatures. First off, we have Chandra's Embercat and Runaway Steamkin. Chandra's Embercat is a 2-drop for a 2/2, and we can tap it to add a red mana. We can only use that to cast elementals or Chandra Planeswalkers. That's not really going to be a problem for us in this deck. Runaway Steamkin is a 2-drop for a 1/1 when it reads whenever we cast a red spell. With fewer than 3 +1/+1 counters, we can put on our Steamkin and can remove 3 to add 3 mana to our mana pool. Heart and the Heb Dead Horde Champion. Burnished Heart, we can pay 3 and sack it to put 2 basic lands in the battlefield tapped from our deck. And then, of course, the Head Deal Champion is Trample, and it's a 5/4. Yes, it's on Bolas' side, but it still gives us a lot of advantage. It gives us a lot of red. So whenever he deals combat damage to a player or Planeswalker, we can discard any number of cards we want from our hand, draw that many, and add red to our mana pool for each card we drew. And then, of course, if we don't lose that mana as we move through phases this turn. We have Jaya Ballard and Koth the Hammer. Both of these cost, Jaya costs 5 and Koth costs 4. Koth will enter with 3 loyalty, and Jaya will enter with 5. Koth's first ability is +1. We can untap a target mountain we control. It becomes a 4/4 elemental until the end of the turn. It's still land. So essentially, he's kind of like the red Nissa. For neg 2, we can add a red to our mana pool for each mountain we control. And for neg 5, he's going to give us an ability that's an emblem that says whenever we tap a mountain for mana, we can deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Jaya will cost 5 and enter with 5 loyalty. We can +1 to add 3 red mana to our mana pool. We can only use it for an instant sorcery, so she's not as flexible as Torch of Defiance, but it's still 3 mana, and we do have a lot of instant sorceries in the deck. For +1, she'll allow us to discard up to 3 cards and draw that many, and for neg 8, she'll give us a pseudo Passing Flames emblem, which will let us cast instant sorcery cards from our graveyard, but we exile them after we use them. To our artifact ramp, first off, we have Wafer's Bobble and Expedition Map. Both of these cost 1, and we can pay 2 and tap them to go grab some lands. Wafer's Bobble is going to get a land into play tapped, a basic land, and Expedition Map is going to go grab us any land we want to our hand. So obviously we can go and grab something like Valakut if we want. We have our Gilded Lotus, which will cost 5, and we can tap for 3 red. Soul Ring, which will tap for 2 colors. Ruby Medallion, which will make all our red spells cost less. And Darksteel Ingot, which costs 3, is indestructible and can tap for any mana we want. Instant and Sorcery ramp, we have our 2 rituals, Phoretic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, and of course we have Seething Song. Desperate and Phoretic cost 2 and add 3 red to our mana pool, and Seething costs 3 and adds 5. Mana Gate. It's a 5-drop spell that adds red to our mana pool for each tap land our opponents control. Helps us go infinite with the Reiterate. Another great way we have to ramp is the Griffle Ori. This is a 4-drop artifact that reads each player may play an additional land on each of their turns, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they have no cards in hand, we get to draw, that player gets to draw 3 cards. Pseudo group hug cards, so maybe it'll incentivize people to not attack you. To access the top card of our library, we have Vance's Blasting Cannons, Light Up the Stage, and Active Impulse. Active Impulse allows us to exile the top 3 cards of our library, and we may play them this turn. Of course, we can play lands this way, which is great. Light Up the Stage costs 3 and exiles the top 2, but we get until the end of the next turn to play them. But if an opponent's taken damage this turn, we can play it for its spectacle cost, which is 1 red. Vance's Blasting Cannons reads at the beginning of our upkeep, we exile the top card of our library. If it's a non-land card, we may play it this turn. When we cast our 3rd spell in a turn, we may transform it. It transforms into a land that taps for red, and we can pay 3 and tap to deal 3 damage. Most of the time, I'm just going to keep it as the Vance's Blasting Cannons, because it definitely does a lot more for the deck than the extra land, but that's up to you. Other utility cards we run Gamble and Past in Flame. Past in Flame costs 4, and it gives each instant sorcery card in our graveyard flashback until the end of the turn, with flashback equal to their casting cost, and of course it also has flashback for 5. Gamble allows us to search our library for any card, put it in our hand, and we have to discard that card at random from our hand. A single target removal, with starting with our Chandra Flavor, with Exquisite Firecraft, Chandra's Triumph, and Incinerate. Exquisite Firecraft is a 3-drop sorcery that deal 4 damage to target creature or player. Also has Spell Mastery, so if we have 2 or more instant sorceries in our graveyard, cannot be countered by spells or abilities. Chandra's Triumph is a 2-drop instant that will deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If we have a Chandra Planeswalker, we can deal 5 instead. Incinerate is a 2-drop instant that will deal 3 damage to target creature or player. A creature dealt this way cannot be regenerated. I love this card because it also has my favorite piece of Chandra flavor text in all of Magic the Gathering. Attack removal, we have Shenanigans, Vandalblast, and By Force. Shenanigans is a 2-drop that will destroy target artifact. We can dredge it for 1, so if we're going to draw a card, we can discard a card from the top of our library instead to add it back to our hand from our graveyard. Vandalblast was a 1-drop that will destroy target artifact, or we can overload it for 5, and we can destroy all artifacts we don't control. By Force is a red and an X, and we can use it to destroy X target artifacts. Other single target removal cards, we have Red Elemental Blast and Chaos Warp. Red Elemental Blast will counter target blue spell or destroy target blue permanent. Of course, play Pyroblast as well if you want to in the deck. Chaos Warp is a 3-drop instant that will make the owner of target permanent shuffle it into their library, and then of course we reveal top card of our library. If the owner reveals top card of the library, if it's a permanent, you can put it on the battlefield. Single target burn. So we have Volt Charge and we have Banefire. Volt Charge will do 3 damage to target creature or player, then allows us to proliferate, obviously giving us extra loyalty counters for our Chandras, which is what we want. Banefire is red and X, and it'll do X damage to any target, and if it's 5 or more, it cannot be countered by spells or abilities, which is absolutely beneficial for us, especially if we can copy it and get maximum use out of it. Our global burn now, first off, we have Oath of Chandra. It'll deal 3 damage to target creature when it enters the battlefield that an opponent controls. And beginning of each end step, if a planeswalker enters the battlefield under our control, into this turn, under our control, it'll deal 2 damage to each opponent. Brand Archer, which will read whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it'll deal 1 damage to each opponent. Price of Progress, 2-drop instant, it'll deal 2 damage equal to each player, equal to the twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. Active Board Wipe, it'll cost 1 less for each creature on the battlefield, and it'll deal 13 damage to each creature. Comet Storm and Jaya's Immolating Inferno are insanely powerful cards. Both of them cost 2 red and an X, and they'll deal X damage equal to the number that you put into the X to any targets. Of course, Jaya's Immolating Inferno will hit up to 3 targets, and Comet Storm will hit as many targets as we want, as long as we pay 1 more for the multi-kicker. Impulse Draw, first off, we have Cathedric Reunion, we have Thrill of Possibility, and we have Faithless Looting. Cathedric Reunion is a 2-drop sorcery that has additional costs. We have to discard 2 cards. We get to draw 3. Thrill of Possibility is an instant for 2 that forces us to discard a card in addition to its cost. We get to draw 2. And Faithless Looting is a 1-drop with flashback for 3, where we draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Skills, because we are mono red, we have Magus of the Wheel, Wheel of Fate, and Reforge the Soul. Reforge the Soul, we want to try and get that miracle cost for 2. It'll make everyone discard their hand and draw 7 cards, otherwise it'll cost 5 as a sorcery. Wheel of Fate, we can suspend it for 4 for 2 mana. 1 in a red, and then when it comes in after the 4th suspend counter, we discard our hand and draw 7 cards. Magus of the Wheel is a 3-drop creature, but we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to make everyone discard their hand and draw 7 cards. Reveler, which is a creature, it'll cost 1 less to cast for each instant sorcery in our graveyard. It has prowess, so when we cast a non-creature spell, it'll get +1/+1 until end of turn. And then, of course, when it enters the battlefield, we discard our hand and draw 3 cards. Molten Psyche, which will force everyone to shuffle the cards from their hand into their library and draw the same amount. It has Metalcraft as well, so if we have 3 or more artifacts when we cast this card, everyone's going to take, all opponents are going to take damage equal to the number of cards they took this turn. Howling Mine, which of course will allow each player to draw an initial card in their upkeep if Howling Mine is untapped. Taking a look at our land base, starting off with our non-basic lands, first off we have Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. It's going to enter the battlefield tapped, and whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under our control, if we have 5 or more other mountains, we'll be able to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. It'll tap for red. We're also running Myriad Landscape, which will enter the battlefield tapped and tap for colorless mana. We can also pay 2, tap, and sack it to go grab 2 mountains from our library onto the battlefield tapped. Flamekin Village is going to enter the battlefield tapped unless we have an elemental from our hand. We can tap it to add red to our mana pool, and we can also pay red and tap it to give target creature haste until the end of the turn. We're running Forge of Heroes and Khan's Bastion, which is going to help our Chandra get a little bit bigger in terms of her loyalty counters. Forge of Heroes is going to tap for colors, and we can tap it to choose target commander that enters the battlefield this turn. It can get +1/+1 counter removes the creature, and it can get an extra loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker. We need to remember, of course, that Chandra is our commander, whether she's a planeswalker or she's a creature, so then we can get multiple uses out of Forge of Heroes. Khan's Bastion will tap for colors, and we can pay for tap it to proliferate, of course, increasing the counters of all our Chandra planeswalkers, plus any other counters we want on the battlefield. Other utility lands we have, of course, the Detection Tower and Interplanetary Beacon. Planetary Beacon will give us a life every time we cast a Planeswalker spell. We can tap it to add colors, and we can pay one, tap it to add 2 mana of different colors, only to use to cast Planeswalker spells. Don't really use it for that, just use it to gain life when we cast Planeswalkers. Detection Tower will tap for colors, and we can pay 1 and tap it until end of turn. Opponents and creatures our opponents control with hexproof can be the targets of spells and abilities as though they didn't have hexproof. This can be really useful for cutting cards that we do want to choose multiple targets. If our opponent's hexproof, our deck essentially dies. Other utility lands we have are Maze of Ith and Inventor's Fair. Inventor's Fair is going to give us a life at the beginning of our upkeep if we control 3 more artifacts, and then of course it'll tap for colorless mana. We can pay for tap and sack it to search a life for an artifact, build it, put our hand, and then use this if we have 3 or more artifacts. We do have some pretty strong utility artifacts in this deck, such as Chandra's Regulator or the Chain Bell, just to name 2. This can definitely help us tutor those out without the risk of having to discard it from something like Gamble. Maze of Ith can protect one of our Chandras by putting a target attacking creature out of combat and untapping it, and preventing all damage it would deal. We're also playing Forgotten Cave, which we can tap, pay red, and discard it to cycle to draw a card. And we're playing 20 Mountains. But anyway, guys, that is it for the deck. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Remember, of course, this deck probably will change once we find out what more new cards are in the Chandra spellbook. I'm super excited for that. Have you guys also built any decks based around a flip Planeswalker? Let me know in the comments below. I'm actually thinking of making a Nissa one as well. If you like the video, remember to like and subscribe. Hit the bell button so you're updated whenever I release new content. Let me know if you have any suggestions about cards I may have forgotten that might work really well in this deck. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you for my next video.